Dr. Beans was missing. Well, not exactly missing. Everyone in Georgetown knew where the much-loved doctor was. He had been captured by the British during the War of 1812. It's just that his neighbors and patients needed him. Dr. Beans has been held prisoner on a British ship.
The townspeople needed a lawyer to talk with the British. They called on a respected local lawyer whose name was Francis Scott Key. Key was a good lawyer and a friend of Dr. Beans. He went to Baltimore to ask for old Doc Beans' freedom.
Key sailed down the bay on a truce ship and met the British ship that had sailed up the Chesapeake Bay and anchored opposite Fort McHenry. Key brought a letter from President Madison stating the doctor was indeed a private citizen and should be released.
As it happened, Francis Scott Key couldn't have picked a worse time to try and win the doctor's freedom. The British troops had already invaded and captured Washington, D.C. They had set fire to the Capitol and to the White House. Now they wanted to capture Baltimore. But first, they had to destroy Fort McHenry because it guarded the city.
Even though Key successfully won the doctor's release, both men were held aboard the British ship until the completion of the attack on Baltimore. Key and his friend had overheard too many details about the coming attack on Baltimore and Fort McHenry.
1 year earlier, Major George Armistead, commander of Fort McHenry, had decided that the British would probably attack Baltimore. Since his fort guarded Baltimore, McHenry would be attacked first. He had purchased an extra-large American flag for the battle so that the British would be sure to see it. The flag was half the size of a basketball court.
As Francis Scott Key and Dr. Beans were held on the British ship, the large flag flew over Fort McHenry.
The attack on Fort McHenry began on September 13th. The bombing continued for 25 hours, with the British firing rockets across the sky. Aboard the British ship, Key watched the battle. Whenever a bomb exploded or rocket burst high in the air, the glare from the explosion gave off enough light for them to be able to see the flag still flying over the fort.
Other British soldiers were attacking the fort from behind. But then, sometime during the night, the shelling stopped. All was quiet. Had McHenry fallen? Did the British break through to Baltimore? He did not know. He could not see anything, and he was worried.
In the pre-dawn darkness, Key waited for the sight that would end his worry. When daylight came, Key spotted the huge flag waving above Fort McHenry. Major Armistead had refused to take down the flag or surrender the fort. It was still flying over Fort McHenry. Baltimore was safe. Overjoyed with the sight of great flag blowing in the breeze, he cried out, "Oh, say, can you see?"
Francis Scott Key was so overwhelmed by what he had seen during the battle and so relieved by what he saw at first light that he wrote down some words on the back of a letter he had in his pocket. As the British pulled out of the Chesapeake Bay, he continued to write lines of his poem.
The next day, on September 16th, when he and Dr. Beans were allowed on shore, Key revised the words he had drafted while aboard ship. He showed his poem to his brother-in-law, who gave it to a newspaper. Within days, his poem was known all over the city. Before long, people all over the country were singing the new song. All of America had taken the song to heart. In 1931, a law was passed making the Star-Spangled Banner the official national anthem.
Francis Scott Key isn't remembered for what he contributed to the practice of law. He is remembered for so meaningfully honoring the flag that survived the British bombs. He is honored today for his contribution to freedom and patriotism in the land of the free and the home of the brave.